First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for taking out the time to stop by the platform. I really appreciate you doing that. And also, I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I really look forward to hearing more about it.
Terrific. Well, I'm delighted to be here, and it's really nice to meet you, and I'm impressed by the platform.
Definitely appreciate you. For the viewers who may not recognize you, could you let them know who you are, where you're from, and definitely what do you do?
Okay, my name is Jonathan Hansen. I'm a senior lecturer in social studies at Harvard University. That's a fancy way of saying that I'm a historian trained in U.S. intellectual history, the history of ideas, but more recently writing books not about U.S. history, but about Cuban history and currently about the history of Rwanda. I'm working on a biography of Rwandan President Paul Kagame.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Now I can ask you this. When did you develop this passion for history? Is it something you were always interested in when you were younger, or did you kind of get into it later in life?
No, it's a really good question. I've always been interested in history. In my memory, it goes back to about seventh grade, and I had a teacher who, for one reason or another, inspired me to take an interest. And he would have really strange historical quizzes once a week at the beginning of class. And I would take great pride in trying to do as well as possible in those quizzes. And then in high school, I just had a couple of teachers who happened to be historians who were really good, and they inspired me, and they suggested to me that being a school teacher or eventually a historian might be a great thing to do. So it was really a matter of having mentors, some of my favorite teachers as historians, that got me into the field. And then by college, this pattern continued. I had some great historians teaching me in college and graduate school. And eventually, I wanted to contribute to the debates, not just read about the debates, but actually contribute to them and write my own books and teach my own classes. And that's what I'm doing now.
Wow, that's amazing. You know what I'm saying? You just could have one teacher that can inspire you or lead you on a path, plant a small seed, but obviously it came full circle. Now you teaching it and you writing books, you educating people on the history, which can be very empowering.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I have a little influence on some of them anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Now I can ask you, what courses do you teach?
So at Harvard right now, I'm in this program called Social Studies, which was really an interdisciplinary undergraduate honors program with economists, historians, political theorists, sociologists, anthropologists, and so on. I'm part of a big co-taught course called The History of Social Thought. It's called Social Studies 10, but it's a history of social and political thought going back years. And now it began, sort of as classic social and political thought, European, but now we have a host of different voices. And so we're trying to make it more diverse, more interesting, more up to date. So that's one course. And then I teach a course there called Justice and Reconciliation After Mass Violence, and it's connected to my work in Rwanda. And this course is a small seminar for interested students who want to engage both theoretical work on how countries have typically tried to reconcile from trauma, and then also a series of case studies with the US Civil War, recently the Troubles in Ireland, and then finally a case study on Rwanda, of which I'm working on now.
Wow, okay. Like I said, I don't know if I told you, I'm currently in Africa. I'm in Ghana. I've been to about 20 African countries. I had the opportunity to visit Rwanda. It's definitely the cleanest place I've seen in Africa for sure. It's a beautiful place.
When were you there, Taye?
I think that was last year. I was there for about 2 weeks. No, 2023, I was there.
What else did you notice besides the cleanliness?
Oh no, that was the main focus. I mean, the people were beautiful, friendly, beautiful culture. I went to the Genocide Museum. There was some performances, some plays, some music, some acting going on, you know.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that 30 years ago that place had been the victim of a genocide with having lost up to 1 million people and having no institutions left, everything in tatters. And to think of the rebuilding they did really exceeds expectations and predictions. Um, I first became interested in Rwanda in 2010 because my wife is a physician at Boston Children's Hospital, and a group called Partners in Health, and their leader, Paul Farmer, who was a friend of ours, sadly, he passed away, asked my wife to come and introduce a neonatal newborn medicine protocol to the country. And in 2010, when we arrived, we went with our three kids and we lived for a summer in the east in a rural area, rural part of Rwanda in a very small village. And 2010, our trip coincided with a big report by the UN saying what a disaster Rwanda was and what a tyrant Paul Kagame is. And I was open to it. I didn't know much about Rwanda at the time. I was writing a book on Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And I said, okay, well, I'll take a look around, see what happens. But the time I spent there, those 3 months, I saw a really different story. I saw Rwandans working together at many, many different levels across race and gender, ethnicity, class, administrative hierarchy, you name it, working together on common projects. And as I put it to myself, I thought, it seems like in Rwanda right now, common work is contributing to a common weal, a common sense of social solidarity, and really inspiring a profound sense of hope that this cut against everything I'd been hearing and reading from that UN report, but other things too. And I just thought that the picture of Rwanda, what's going on in Rwanda, must be much more complicated than what I was hearing about it. And then we've been back every year since with my wife's work originally, except for one during COVID. And then as my most recent book on Fidel Castro, another long story, was nearly complete. I started to talk to some people in the president's office in Rwanda about the possibility of doing a book on Paul Kagame. I like to work on people that I think are caricatured in much of the Western media, especially like Castro. People love him or they hate him, and I was interested in the messy middle where human beings actually live our lives, right? And the same with Kagame. Kagame is both loathed among the NGO and human rights communities and many people in the United States and elsewhere, but he's also loved by many and appreciated, in for the kind of things you saw when you were there. But both of those poles, I think, are caricatures, and they miss the middle, the complexity where, again, where we live our lives. And I set out to write a history of Rwanda that captured all that. In my mind, what's going on there is unprecedented in human history. Rwandans trying to recover from the double whammy of colonialism and genocide. And it's a titanic, extremely difficult piece of work, maybe as difficult as anything could ever be. And if that's the case, doing the work is going to be as difficult as anything could be. It's going to be messy at times, it's going to be brutal, it's going to be successful, there'll be failures, they'll get criticism, they'll get some praise. But it's all of that that I'm trying to capture. I think of history as an exercise in moral imagination. And I'm trying to get readers, and I did this with Castro book too, to suspend judgment temporarily for understanding. That is, to not judge until they know, and to actually put themselves in the place of these people that we write about and ask readers, challenge readers to say, okay, imagine if you were in this person's shoes. What would you have done? What were the real options, not the ideal options that we gin up in Washington, London, Paris, and Munich, right? But what were the real options available to this person when he made this choice or this choice? If there was a massacre, what do you think precipitated that massacre? And it's a really difficult process and it takes a lot of work. And, I don't pretend to be able to do it perfectly, but I strive to do it as nearly as perfectly as possible, as humanly possible, despite my own biases and presuppositions.
Wow, that's some incredible work. And definitely, I take my hat off to Rwanda. Like you said, I never could imagine that this was the same place, that I seen the video footage of, like you say, a million people being massacred and how they were able to, try to move forward and reconcile and things like that. But I can ask you this. Now, you studying the language as well?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Ndimo kwigiti in Rwanda. That means I'm studying Rwanda, Burimunsi, right now, every day, by Zoom from Boston to Kigali. I have a teacher. I had my class this morning at 7 a.m., by the way. I get up at 5 o'clock or so to do my umukoro, my homework. It's a really difficult language. I had to learn Spanish for the Castro and Guantanamo books. And that worked pretty much. I could do all my own translations. I could speak, not perfectly, but well enough. I wasn't living there. I was visiting all the time. It's really difficult, as you know, to learn a language when you're not living in a place. But that worked. But I don't even expect necessarily to master this. Kinyarwanda is a Bantu language, and it's exceedingly difficult. They have 16 different cases of nouns that all affect every verb that follows or that is used in sentences. And I'm getting it. I love the work. I understand the grammar, but to hear Rwandan speak is difficult for me because, of course, they speak comfortably and quickly, and they speak in slang, and it's I don't know, it's a Herculean task, and I'm trying to do it. And I love the language, and at my age, we got to work out our synapses. But I'm not sure I'll ever really get it. I love trying.
Wow, that's amazing because a lot of times I guess the reader we take for granted the amount of work that an author puts into a book. We might get 300 pages, but you putting in years and years and also learning the language, that's probably something that the reader probably would never conceive like, oh, okay, you took years to learn how to even know the
Yeah.
basics. That's truly amazing. Now I can ask you this one more question. Um, have you considered doing maybe like a documentary or even a film or anything like that based upon either your work in Rwanda or,
Yes.
in Cuba?
For sure. I had some interest in it. It kind of faded because, things come and go very quickly with the Castro book. I was in conversation with ABC, among others, to do a sort of mini series. And then there was some talk and some interest from some people in Hollywood. And that sort of faded. And I just was using, devouring too much energy to sort of like, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Following up. So I just let that go. But I am in conversation. It's a little early to say. I'm still writing the book. Literally this semester, I'm on leave. It's a little too early to say whether the Kagame book would become a film. But his life is unbelievable. The story I'm going to tell you cannot imagine it literally, just as Castro's was. I mean, I brought new life to Castro's life, things that we hadn't known before by focusing on his youth. Same with Kagame, like you wouldn't believe what the guy was doing his whole, as a child, as a youth, and what he suffered from and what he was able to do despite that. So yes, I have a friend who's a documentary filmmaker in Rwanda, Eric Kabera, who's a wonderful filmmaker, and he's interested. We've talked about this tentatively. Others have talked about it. I have a friend who is a former Rwandan soldier during the genocide who wants to maybe co-write a drama about Rwanda with me. I don't even know. He won't tell me. He said, I can't tell you about it until you finish the work. But yes, I'm quite interested in that. I mean, always, right? The more, the more ways we can get out our message, the better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.